Hello and welcome to a very different episode in terms of personnel for the third and short overtime crew. Jord is not here, he is unwell and unavailable. Therefore, they've drafted in King of the Hosts, triple award winning host from the other show, me. So I wouldn't say it was last minute, but it was pretty much last minute that I've managed to get myself on and sorted. And it's massively being winged from me, so I'll let these guys tell me what I've not done right or what I'm not doing right, and I think we'll just go from there. As usual, we have JP, Bones, and Mark as well, and yeah, I think we'll just get straight into it if that's all good with you guys. How are we all doing? We all good?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good.
Not bad. Ready to go.
Good stuff. Is Mark alive?
I'm just
frozen in place.
waiting here to open up and start talking about offensive lines. It's one of my favourite positional groups.
I think you've sort of nominated yourself to go first, then, haven't you? Because that is the theme of this week, offensive lines, basically. And I don't mean some of the comedy JP and I come out with on a regular basis. It's more NFL, as you would know. The regular watchers and listeners should know that. So there's various topics. I'm looking down at my phone because I've literally just had the structure sent to me by JP less than 10 minutes ago. What we're going to start with is talking about the offensive line. What makes a good offensive line? I think we'll start off with Mark, as I said then. What makes a good offensive line, Mark?
You know, what makes a good offensive line? Well, I guess it depends on what kind of system you're playing and what you've got behind the offensive line. You know, like if you run heavy offensive line, you're looking for, like a single block concept offensive line. Power game, it's called. Where you'll have big bodies on the offensive line. You'll have 5 players all over 320 pounds. And their main aim of the game will be to take on the person who's in front of them, single block, and overpower them in the run game to create lanes for your running back. Then you've got the offensive line, what JP's team would adopt, which is like an outside zone kind of running system. And what that means is you want to, extend the line of the pocket. So when you think about it, you normally line up with a left tackle, left guard, centre, right guard, right tackle. And what an outside zone offensive line is they pull and they have runs. So what might happen is that the right guard might kick out and pull round and become left tackle to stretch the pocket kind of thing. So what you can do is you can run an outside zone running game. And the benefit of running an outside zone running game is you're running away from the linebackers who are routinely in the middle of the field. And what you're trying to do is you try to stretch that field of play so you can attack the perimeters of the defense, which of course is where the cornerback is. And there's about 60 pounds worth of difference there. Linebackers are known good for run stopping and hitting people in the hole, whereas corners are known more for coverage and not so much in run stopping. So you've got zone concepts as well. And then you've got things like trap blocking and stuff like that, which again is quite similar. So it depends really on what you're looking for. If you're wanting to pound the ball through the middle and you've got a power line, you're looking for big bodies. If you're wanting to run a zone or outside zone running scheme, what we're seeing in the Jets and what we're seeing at the 49ers and what we're seeing at the Rams this year, you're looking for more athletic, offensive line players who are still strong but are nimble enough to be able to, kick out. And that's really what you're looking for. JP, am I correct that you used to coach offline position groups, didn't you? So I'm sure you're going to be able to digress a lot more than I am. But what makes a good offensive line, it really is what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You've stolen my intro, Legs. I was going to say that I used to coach O-line. I coached O-line for a couple of years. It's very scheme dependent, as you say. I think more teams, certainly at the level I was coaching, trended to zone block because it's hard to find the guys that are the right size to play the position, but you can find people that you can coach to use the right footwork and use the right leverage. Power blocking, if you have the athletes, is probably the most effective, but it does depend what you want to do as an offense. You were right about when you said about Shanahan's offense, very zone-heavy running. and play action schemes off that. That requires sort of it seems daft to say small offensive lineman, because a small offensive lineman is like 280 pounds. But somebody that's a bit more nimble, got good footwork, can get out in space and kind of, just kind of not play in a phone box, I think is the term that they often use for guys that are, more power blockers. You look at a line like the Titans, kind of like a Derrick Henry sort of running back gets a similar sort of offensive line. I think there's some merit to that as well. If you've got a power back, you'll have a power offensive line. One of the key things that I think we've kind of touched on, but I know we're going to go position by position. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the positions shortly. Cohesion is a massive thing. You can have the best athletes in the world, you can have the best blockers in the world. If they can't work as a unit, if they can't work as a 5-person unit, you're screwed, especially in zone blocking, because it's so much about that getting out in space, but also doing it in a sensible fashion so that you're actually blocking the areas that you need to block. I think you wanted to add a little bit more, Mark, so I'll go back to you now.
No, well, I'm going to ask you whilst I'm picking your brains, because obviously the Raiders, who are mine and Matt's team, have gone through a dramatic O-line shift. And when I was listening to Gruden, when I was listening to Tom Cable, and also Mike Neok, like a training camp, one of the things that they said was just how much faster our offensive line is. So if anybody doesn't follow the Raiders, we dumped 3 of our highly paid offensive line players this year. We dumped Rodney Hudson, who was on the decline, but albeit still one of the best pass blocking centers in the NFL. We dumped Gabe Jackson, who I would argue hasn't been the same since his Achilles injury. And you've got to remember that we extended Gabe Jackson before we took Khalil Mack to the table. That's the truth of it. People say, well, Derek Carr got his contract, and it was either Carr or Mack. The truth of the matter is, it wasn't. The 3 of them came out the same draft class. And we renewed Gabe Jackson before we renewed Khalil Mack as well. Sorry, opening up old wounds. So Gabe Jackson has now went to Seattle. Jordan's team was not here. Trent Brown, who was brilliant. I wouldn't call him athletic. I would just call him big. You know what I mean? It's hard to get around somebody his size. Didn't have the best footwork. Didn't have the best handwork. But he was like the size of my wardrobe, which is just to the right of his, you know what I mean? So we ditched those 3 players and we got in Leatherwood. We brought back Denzel Good. Got a lad from Clemson last year called John Simpson. And we brought in Alex James, who was sitting on a practice squad for the last 2 years, or sitting on a roster, watching for the last 2 years, not on the practice squad. He made the 53-man roster, just didn't suit up, played a couple of snaps. So we've now got James at centre, we've now got John Simpson at right guard, and we've now got Alex Leatherwood at right tackle. And one of the things that I've heard from training camp is just how much faster that offensive line is. Does speed make a difference, John, in this game? Power.
It's less speed and probably quickness, but also the ability to get your angles right, especially if you are going to be more of that shifty type zone blocking lineman. I'm actually not surprised Gruden's gone in that direction, because I think his Tampa Bay team, it's going back a while now, but his Super Bowl winning team was largely built around that as well. They weren't a power team, probably at a time where there was more power teams than there are now. I think power running has largely got out of the game. You look at how most of the offenses are now, a lot of Shanahan influenced and a lot of zone type schemes. I think power blocking's kind of gone out of the game. I wouldn't say speed's important, because having like a 4.5 40 as a lineman is probably a liability. You need to be in the right place at the right time. You don't need to be there quickly. But your quickness will help you set up, and it will help you kind of gain leverage. I mean, I talked before about having sort of undersized O-lines. You can get away with that if you angle block correctly. You don't have to be massive. You think about the Bill Walsh teams of the 1980s. They were not large lines, but what they were capable of doing was blocking correctly on an angle, and that can remove the power aspect. If I'm catching you, I'm probably a bad example. I'm a pretty big guy, but if somebody was trying to block me, for instance, I've got dodgy balance, so this is turned into a terrible example. But say I was normal, able-bodied. I'm a big guy. It's not going to be easy to move me if you're straight on at me. But if you hit me from the side, you can gain some leverage there that you wouldn't do straight on. And that's a lot of what people talk about when they talk about speed. It's about quickness. It's also about hand speed as well, which is something that doesn't get focused on a great deal. I think you had a little bit, Bones. So
I think you touched on a couple of interesting things there, to be honest. The hand placement, the thing about speed of hand placement is a big one. I was watching some tape from the preseason games this week, and Mark brought up Alex Leatherwood again, and I watched some Leatherwood tape. The guy, he makes the quick reads, quick, intelligent. You see him like in a certain play. There's a defender that he just hands off to his guard to block. The defender comes to hit him, and he's like, nah. Passes it off to the guard and knows that he needs to go out and block the outside linebacker instead, and it sets up a really nice play for the Raiders. Like stuff like that mental quickness. It's not necessarily speed. It's mental speed. It's mental agility a lot of the time on the offensive line. It's reading who you need to go and block and making sure that you don't want two offensive linemen. You don't want to be double teaming the wrong guy. Do you know what I mean? So I think the quickness and cohesion come together. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm trying to get to. I think is cohesion and quickness are one in the same in the offensive line. I think.
How are you liking the praise for Leatherwood there, Mark?
No, look. If you go back to my original pod with you, Matt, I was saying this earlier on today. Me and you did a pod together in September, way before like the whole. And I was talking about the Raiders, how drafting the right tackle would make too much sense, and I mentioned Leatherwood and Sam Cosmi as two tackles in that conversation. And one of the things with Leatherwood, right, is it's not that I don't like Alex Leatherwood. It's that Alex Leatherwood was a senior at Alabama. In Alabama, you get professional football coaching. The coaches at Alabama are just as good as you're going to find in the NFL, if not better. I think we've got 3 head coaches this year on their coaching staff. And Bill O'Brien's there. He's just went there. So it wasn't that I was worried about. Alex Leatherwood's a very good player. What I didn't like about Leatherwood is, one, he was a senior, 23 years old, coming into the NFL. And 2, he'd got lots of really good coaching at Alabama. So my main concern is what we see is what we're going to get. Because when I look at Leatherwood, one of the things that I was really worried about was not his hand placement, because he's really savvy, was his footwork, and particularly his left-hand placement. He allowed a lot of inside leverage to speed rushers in college. He always wants to show them the outside because he's a big guy and he's powerful, and he wants to show them the outside. Then when they go to dip round him, he wants to use his hands to keep them down. You know what I mean? To stop them getting round the bend. What he was really poor with, what we saw with Alex Ujulari in college against Georgia and in the Senior Bowl, was that left hand punch. His right hand punch was great. His left hand usage, when the speed rusher would spin to come back in, he'd collapse almost on the block and let a lot of inside pressure in between right tackle and right guard. He would get beat inside, is what I'm saying. He impressed us last week, though. I watched the Raiders game back, and to be honest with you, I think what we're seeing is we're probably seeing that Alex Leatherwood probably is the most pro-ready. But that's because of the competition that he's played in. What I think is we will see Penny Sewell, and we'll see Rashawn Slater, and we will see these players have, as they learn and as they curve, they'll end up overtaking Leatherwood. But he is a very high floor player. I don't know how high his ceiling is. Safe pick, I thought.
So, JP, you've got something to add about running and pass blocking?
Yeah, just off a point that Mark made, which I really wish I'd picked up on earlier. Footwork is a massive, massive thing. You can be the biggest, the fastest, the strongest athlete, but so much of that position is about technique, especially on the outside with the tackles. Because you think about the guys they're going up against. If you're the size of Trent Brown and you're going up against a Joey or a Nick Bosa, who are fast and still pretty strong, probably not as strong as you, but strong enough to make a difference, and they can get you off balance. Your footwork is hugely important. How you set up your base in pass protection is massive. I'm actually doing it with my hands, but you can't really see. But how you set up in that scenario is huge, because if you lose any leverage against those guys, you are screwed. It's less important in run blocking, but you do still have to get it right. You have to have enough to get. I keep using the word leverage, and I think that's probably a key as well. You have to be able to get enough leverage behind you to move your man in run blocking, and these are things that you can teach them, but a lot of it is natural kind of athletic ability. It's kind of you have to be able to do that. You have to be coordinated. You can't just stumble around and be big and massive. You probably could at one stage in the NFL. The fact is now defenders are probably too savvy, too athletic now. You look at some of the edges in the league, some of them are hard enough to block as it is. Even inside players, one of the biggest things about this offseason, certainly for my team, the 49ers, was improving the interior blocking, your left and right guards, because a lot of pressure comes from there now. You think about someone like Aaron Donald. He can screw up a play before you've even snapped the ball. If he's coming between the guard and the center, that is absolutely painful for anybody. Anytime you get somebody coming through the A gap, you're screwed. There's just so much speed and athleticism out there now that it's impossible to just be the big. I think that's why we're seeing less of the big hulking linemen. It's just really, really hard to do. I'll move on because, I used to coach it, so I could talk about it pretty much all night, to be honest with you. I've worked with some bad offensive lines. I would love to say I've worked with some good ones. We did actually have quite a good one in my first year coaching. But as far as the NFL goes, we've been casting the net around looking for some of the better offensive lines in the league. I think we found a few good examples. I'll let Mark kick us off because I know he likes offensive line play just as much as me. Who have you got as a good offensive line in the NFL?
Currently, I think the best offensive line in the NFL, and they have been probably for a year or two, and it's probably the New Orleans Saints. When I look at their offensive line, you can see they've put a lot of stock into drafting in the offensive line. So their starters from left to right. It's Terran Armstead. He's been a Pro Bowler since 2018. So that's 3 years consecutive Pro Bowl, second team All-Pro. So you've got Terran Armstead at left tackle. You've got Andres Pete at left guard. He was a first-round draft pick. You've got Eric McCoy in center. He was a first-round draft pick. You've got Cesar Ruiz at right guard. I think he was a first-round draft pick. And you've got Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. Again, Pro Bowler, first-round draft pick. So when I think about really good offensive lines, and I think about who's the best, you know what I mean? Who's invested in it, and who will I say protects their quarterback the best? Because I had Drew Brees there, and a lot of that stuff was quick reading. Drew Brees was aging and stuff like that. I knew they had to protect him. The Saints, for me, are the flag bearers for the best offensive line in the NFL at this moment in time.
I think the Saints is an interesting one. I think we might see a different thing for the Saints this year because it's like you mentioned, Breeze is known for getting pass out quickly, getting the ball moving quickly. The offensive line, he's good. He's friendly for his offensive line. He's good for his offensive line. Whereas if Jameis Winston is the starter in New Orleans, that offensive line is going to have to work like 3 times as hard to keep like dirt off that guy's uniform. And I don't know. I hope they can keep it up. I do think they can keep it up. I think they are one of the best offensive lines in the league. I just wonder how much of that was supplemented by Breeze's quick pass game and how much is going to suffer with Winston's gunslinger mentality.
Do you think, or does anyone think that, I'll probably come to you, JP, first, that the quarterback has a massive influence on who is in the offensive line?
Yeah, it's funny. We talked a little bit about this as a potential subject. I think what you're seeing now, traditionally, offensive line has been a very highly paid position in the NFL. You think about some of the big contracts that have been given out to certainly left tackles, even some centers. There's been some big money paid out to linemen. Even guys like Trent Brown, who was, I think, he played right tackle mostly, didn't he, for you guys? He was on a lot of money. He got a big contract back in the day. A lot of money's been spent on O-lines. I think what teams are trying to do now is kind of try and save a little bit of money there and put a mobile guy behind behind a slightly less good offensive line and just hope that the guy can keep himself alive. You only have to look at how the Seahawks have largely built an offensive line for the last, probably about as long as I can remember. I was going to say a decade, but it's probably even longer than that. They've rarely invested capital in a lineman. They have done once or twice, but they don't invest second contracts in a lot of linemen. They don't make big old lineman signings because they got Russell Wilson and they think that Wilson's capable of escaping out of most problems. I think there's some truth in that. I don't know what you guys think about it, but I do think that's a prevalent trend now. You look at guys like Trey Lance as well, even going back to my team. I said we struggled with interior pass pro. One of the ways you can fix that, get a more mobile QB. You know, it's just one of those things. I don't know what you guys think, but that's to me that's certainly took a big, that's certainly been a big shift in the last few years in the NFL. I think you've got a point, Mark. So
yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying about. I think I'm a big PFF fan, as many years know. I don't understand the bad ref kicks. I think that most of their takes are really cool. I think it's their egos that most people give them a bad rub for. But they always say that, like you don't have to have the best offensive line in the NFL to win championships. When they have analysed it, what they've said is that you want to be towards average. They said you want to be towards average. But of course, what we saw last year is we saw the Kansas City Chiefs behind an escaping mobile quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. I would have said they were edging towards average as an offensive line. But of course, Tampa Bay just sent wave after wave after wave of blitz. They were sending 5 men, 6 men routinely throughout that Super Bowl when we watched it. And the Kansas City Chiefs struggled at the point where now they've went out and they've re-signed and they've went out and got players, to build, they've invested capital in Orlando Brown. Like they went out in free agency and they got Joe Tooney. They drafted a center early in the draft, Yeah, so whilst I would say, the NFL's a copycat league. We've said this before, haven't we, John? And I think, when people like Russell Wilson did come in and Patrick Mahomes came in, we saw offensive coordinators and offensive linemen go, give me 1 Pro Bowl on the line or give me 1 or 2 good players and I'll make the other 3 work. But now after the Super Bowl, I don't know if people are going to start looking at what Kansas have done if they win the Super Bowl again. It's like, if they come back and win the Super Bowl this year, which I think they will, you know what I mean? We'll probably see more people investing in offensive lines again. And I think it is a trend, the NFL, which follows each other. But the truth of the matter is you don't have to have the best offensive line to win the Super Bowl. Average is what PFF say, and on their analysis, they would be right as well.
I think that's a good point about the average offensive lines and what PFF say, because I think a great example of that is on paper at least is the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers on paper have a decidedly average offensive line, but they are schemed into being one of the better offensive lines in the league. Like, it's a great example of how you can succeed with a pretty average offensive line if the scheme's right, if you play it right. And I think, I agree in a way, because I think there are quite a few teams that do fall in the middle and still. So the Titans tend to fall in the middle, but their offensive line is like the core of that team, like still a middling offensive line in the terms of like the 32 teams that we've got. I'd say they're in the middle. Like, there's quite a few teams that do get by with the average line, but I think you saw last year some of the better teams, better offensive lines did do well. Like Tampa Bay have an arguably quite a good offensive line. I think that they should fall into that category. Tristan Whiffs, however you meant to pronounce it. He looks like an absolute phenom at that position. I'd feel like I'd be wrong to not bring it up because Jamie will be upset. But no, I do agree.
We're talking about going back to average, but I think what we've got to remember as well, though, is that the Saints have been routinely in the playoffs. You know what I mean? So there's something said for investing in your offensive line and having protection there as well, And they've got Alvin Kamara. And would Alvin Kamara be the running back or the player that he is if he didn't have a good offensive line in front of him? Just got to look at what happens in New York. With the Giants, they've got Barkley, who's just as talented as Kamara, if not more. But yet he can't make it work because he hasn't got the offensive line creating the holes that Kamara has. You know what I mean? So teams will try to get a running game going sometimes by drafting a running back. Really, I think what we should be seeing is we should be teams drafting offensive linemen. You know what I mean? That'll give you a good running game.
So, yes, the Saints is one good team. Who else have we got listed as a good team, Bones?
The Browns is one of the. It's strange to say it, isn't it? After all these years, to say the Browns has one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, but they really do at the moment. They have a really good offensive line. I was looking at the depth chart before. They've invested in it. They've made trades for better, for upgrades at positions, and they've just allowed Baker Mayfield to do what he needs to do. And it's similar. It's potentially similar to the Breeze situation where Mayfield is a friendly quarterback to have behind a line a lot of the time. Like, he's not the worst quarterback to have. He's not going to drag out plays. He's not going to need to sit in the pocket for ages. Like, he can play a quick pass. He can play a deep pass. He can get out of the pocket. Like, there's a lot of freedom for that offensive line, but they have done really well over the last few years. They've been a solid offensive unit.
JP, what are you saying to the Browns?
They're an interesting group. They are a very good offensive line. They're kind of a emerging team, full stop. We've talked about them on this pod before. It's a team that's invested its draft capital wisely. The thing I would say when you look at the roster on the O-line, there's not a big name in there, really. Possible exception of maybe like Jack Conklin, who was a first-round draft pick. There isn't really anybody that you would immediately go, oh, yeah, they're definitely one of the top 5 offensive linemen at that position in the NFL. But what they do well is they are cohesive. They do work well together. And I think what Bones says is true, that, they do have Baker Mayfield. He is more of the new breed of quarterback, but also they got a good running game as well. And if you can, I think as an offensive line, if you can run block first, it takes a lot of pressure off you in pass pro, because teams get worried about being overrun by that. If you can run at will, you're going to give your pass pro game more chance. I think Mark's got a point on the Browns as well, so let's see what Mark's got.
I think the Browns is what we're going to see when we talk about another team later on. When you've got a young quarterback who's, a few years removed or rookie, the best thing you can give him is a line to protect them. And I think that's what the Browns did. They built their line and then, they got big and then they built their line around them. They have got 2 first-round talents on their line. And incidentally, they're at either tackle position. They've got Jedrick Willis, who was a first-round pick out of Alabama. And they've got Jack Conklin, who was ended up picking him up in free agency. But of course, he was a first-round pick for Tennessee when he was chosen. And then you're right, John. In between them, it's almost they've got Joe Bitonio. I think he was a 3rd rounder from, I can't remember now. I want to say Nevada. And they've got Wyatt Teller, who was, a really good guard last year. And then they've got J.C. Tretter in the middle. So this is a slightly different approach, isn't it, really, at building a line? What they've went is we'll invest heavily. 1 in free agency, 1 in the first round. I guess is what the Raiders have done. You know what I mean, though? Like when we got Trent Brown and then we got Colton Miller, and then we moved on from Trent Brown and put another first rounder in there. We'll invest heavily on the bookends, right tackle and left tackle. And what we'll do is we'll make it work. We'll throw 3rd round picks, we'll throw 2nd round picks, we'll throw 4th round picks every year at the interior, and then hopefully we'll find one that will stick, like they did with Bitonio, and I think Wyatt Teller came in a trade. I'm sure somebody will correct us, you know what I mean? I should have probably looked that up if I remember right. I think it was a trade piece.
It was a trade. I was looking before. It is.
Yeah.
I had a look before. I'll find it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure he came across in a trade. So, that's another way. So the Browns have kind of went a different way at the Saints of building their line, where the Saints invested in all positions. The Browns have kind of went, we'll throw lots of mid-round picks at the middle positions, the guard positions and the centre. But what will Wyatt Teller? There you go, Buffalo. Well done, Bones. I knew they traded from. And what we'll do is we'll try and find guys that will make it work inside. But make no bones about it. Pun intended. Hey, get in. Make no bones about it. A good offensive line helps a young quarterback. And I think that's what we're seeing from this next team, who obviously drafted a quarterback, who I would say have an emerging offensive line. Do you have anything to add on this, Matt, as a host, or can we talk about this next team?
Yeah, go right through, mate.
Okay then, JP, I've already teed this up. This is a nice segue. This. Who's this emerging offensive line who invested in a rookie quarterback this year?
It's got to be the Jets, hasn't it? Yeah. I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. I think, obviously, the Jets have quietly been putting a half-decent line together. It's probably the only good thing you could have said about the team. There's some really good players out there. And obviously, drafting the rookie QB has made a difference as well. Getting Zach Wilson in is obviously a big thing. The first thing you want to do is try and protect him. But I think they've been doing that anyway. They were getting to the stage where, they were getting to the point where they needed to bring in those guys and try and get a little better. Makari Becton is an absolute monster. I'm trying to think who the other guy is on the other side, on the left side of the line. I'm sure somebody will furnish me with that name in a second. I've drawn a blank for some reason.
George, well, they've got two. They've got Morgan Moses, who they picked up off waivers when the Washington Redskins cut him. When they've got Sam Cosme in. Morgan Moses has been a good right tackle for a few years. And they've also got Fant, who they've got across, George Fant.
That's right, George Fant, yeah.
Yeah, he was on Denver's line for a period. I think he was also on the Cowboys line as well. So, like they've got a vet on the right, and they've got Becton, who I would say is a bit like Trent Brown on the left.
Yeah, Becton's going to be an interesting watch in that system, though, because obviously the new coach in Salah, they've got basically nicked an OC from us. So it's going to be a similar system. That's a zone blocking system. Now, we are kind of seeing, and we drafted Aaron Banks, who's massive, to play guard for us. We are kind of seeing a little bit of a shift in what would traditionally have been zone blocking O-line. You're now getting power blocking guys playing in zone blocking O-lines. I'm interested to see how he does, Becton. I think he's got enough movement to cover for it. And to be honest, playing left tackle, it's generally the guards that are moving the most in a zone blocking scheme. So I think really what they're trying to do is protect Zach Wilson's blind side and basically not worry about it. And I think they've done it before. I mean, obviously, many years ago, they had DeBrickashaw Ferguson, who was a superb tackle for many, many years. They do know how to find these linemen. It's just putting the rest of the team around it that seems to be the issue. But I like how they're coming together. I think the offensive scheme will help them because I think it can make sort of average players, certainly on the interior, look a little better. And on the outside of the line, I think they look pretty solid. The key position is centre. In the zone blocking scheme, it's kind of always centre just because of having to identify the mic and move the zone blocking as appropriate, move the protections. If they can get that to click, and generally with the zone blocking, it takes a bit to click. I don't know. They've looked okay in pre-season, but I feel like they've got a few more steps left in them. If they can do that, I think they'll do pretty well. What about you, Mark? You actually nominated these guys. So what did you think to these guys?
You know, and this is what I like about these, and this is such a good link that you've got here because cohesion is important in this situation. So what you've got is you've got a team who went and got their left tackle in the first round of the draft last year, Mekhi Becton. Big lad, brute. Came out and did really well. Graded really well and had a good rookie season. He's a sun blocker. And then what they've done is they've come back and they've went, we're running zone. So we need cohesion. We need someone who's going to play beside this guy for the next 4, 5 years at least, and potentially for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So they came back in the first round this year with their second first-round pick, and they went and got Viara Tucker. So what you've now got on the left-hand side, you've now got Becton and you've got Tucker. One's a rookie, one's 1 year experience, but was actually young when he came in. So I think they're both the similar age. And what they're trying to say is right, okay, you're going to be the left-hand side of our line for at least 5 years. For at least 5 years, because that's a rookie contract. And I think ideally they'd like to extend it. They'd like to see both players see their second contracts. Because then what you'll have is you'll just have that cohesion. Like of players who know who the man is sitting next to them. And they'll know their game and they'll know what they want to do. And of course, you put a rookie quarterback behind that. And all of a sudden, you've got 3 pieces who are growing together. And they grow trust together. And they learn how to communicate. And that's why I wanted to pick this as an emerging line. As this is why I said I was banging the table for the Jets. And the Jets are an emerging line because I've been pretty crap at O-line until last year. But this is why I think they're emerging. Maybe not this year, but maybe it might be 2 or 3 years down the line. But we could see this line could be very good, It could surprise people even this year.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. Things where they'll grow as the team grows, and then when the team is good, which might be 2, 3 years down the road, they'll suddenly go, "Hey, they've got a really good offensive line," but it'll be the same offensive line they had 3 years ago. It'll just come together gradually. I remember that happening to us a few years ago. We had something like, I think it was 5 first-round picks on the O-line, and all of a sudden we started playing well, and everyone was like, "Hey, these guys are good." It's like, yeah, they've kind of always been good. It's the rest of the team that hasn't really followed. Something I just picked up on, just kind of a secondary point. You mentioned about, them having the pieces, putting the pieces around Wilson and stuff, but there's also a really big point there. The QB needs to be cohesive with the line too. We've seen some situations where the line and the QB haven't necessarily said the game the same way. and it does cause some big problems. So I think getting all those guys in early in their careers is probably a big thing for the Jets.
Yeah, I think I think Bones, you wanted to pick up on something about a team that drafted a QB.
Well, his name's come up a few times tonight, and so there were two reasons I wanted to bring this up. Someone mentioned rookie QBs, and this guy's been mentioned a few times, is where's Trent Brown gone to? The New England Patriots, who has quite a solid offensive line right now, the New England Patriots. Like, this is why I wanted to bring them up. I think they're a promising offensive line. They took Michael Onwenu a couple of years back on left guard, solid first left guard, like first team left guard for them. They brought Trent Brown back. They've got a decent line there, and I don't know. I just think that's another one in this emerging category. I think this is another one that we're going to see who've invested a bit in the line now. That it's starting to come together, and over the next few years, we might see something out of this line.
I think New England Patriots have got a good line. They always field a good line. I think they're the epitome of steady on offensive line. The New England Patriots. They throughout the time of Belichick, they've always had a very steady possession on offensive line. And what they've done is they've trusted their coaching, because they've actually let offensive line pieces leave, like Soldier and people like that, and Trent Brown. And what they've done is they've been able to build an offensive line again. Who's their offensive line at the New England Patriots? I think it's Skaggs, isn't it? Scangarello or someone like that. And he's a legendary offensive line coach, John, do you know who the offensive line
coach is? That is him. I can't pronounce his name, but he's been there he's 73 now. He's been there for years. I think he's left once and come back. I think he left. The line basically fell apart, and they brought him back in desperation. I agree. It's a good offensive line. I think a lot of these teams, certainly the emerging ones, all right, you can leave out one of the teams you've got on the list, which I assume we're going to come to in a minute. But some of these teams that we're talking about having emerging lines, you think about a team like Detroit as well, which I know you wanted to mention, Bones. There is signs of a good offensive line there, but those teams don't get noticed until they're successful. The Patriots had a down year last year. I think people are kind of just sleeping on them a little bit. Maybe thought that Brady was the reason the line looks so good because he gets rid of the ball pretty quickly. He seems to know position of every player on the field. So I think we might see something. I think we might see something from the Patriots this year. Yeah, especially with Mac Jones in there, which it looks likely to be now due to the fact that Newton seems to want to keep getting COVID and not getting vaccinated. I think it's opened the door. But we're going to talk rookie QBs in a bit, so I'm not gonna step too far on that point.
I was just going to say that division's going to be really interesting because the Bills are very good. The Dolphins are good. The Jets should be better. And the Patriots should be back to being near to what they should be. It's going to be I feel a bit sorry for the Jets, really. Got a brand new quarterback and an okay team, but they're going to have to play three good teams twice. So,
yeah, there are definitely divisions you'd rather be in if you were. If you were the Jets, I think when we discussed that division, I think we did struggle to call it because it's hard to quantify just how good Miami will be, how good the Patriots will be. There's some interesting storylines in that division. Who else did we have for an emerging O-line then? I think we had one other, didn't we?
The Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs have invested a lot this year, haven't they?
Well, sorry, Mark. Chiefs, I just want to say one thing. Never mind that division being bad for the AFC East. Bad for the AFC in general. It's bad for the Raiders. We're looking for a wild card place. And you've got to think that, that division could put three teams in the playoffs. You've got the Dolphins. You've got the Patriots, who are two really good teams. Then you've got the AFC North. You know what I mean? And we've already talked about the Browns, and you've got the Ravens, and you've got the Steelers. And people are starting to talk about the Raiders as a playoff team. I'm like, good luck. Good luck. Because to get into the playoffs, we have to win 11 games. And we ain't going to win 11 games. Raiders fans, stop building us up. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. I've lost
It
John.
is.
He's laughing. He's at the turn away. He's laughing so hard.
It wouldn't be an episode if we didn't get a random Raiders rant from Mark, would it? I don't know. You did lose me for a second there. I don't know if there's any Raiders fans watching us. I don't know who watches these episodes anymore, but I know there's a few optimistic Raiders fans out there in third and short world. I think Mark is the entirely opposite end of the spectrum. So I'm not quite as down on the prospects as Mark is, but I can see where he's coming from.
So now we can go at the Chiefs' bones.
To make Mark feel worse.
The last emerging line we had was the Chiefs, and I think the Chiefs is another one where you can look at what Mark was saying about investing in young offensive linemen. They've gone out and they've drafted this year 2 offensive linemen. All right, one was in the 6th round with Trey Smith, right guard, Creed Humphrey in the centre. They drafted is it Lucas Niang? Is it Niang? Is that how I pronounce it? That was only a couple of years ago. They went out and traded for Orlando Brown on the last year of his contract, so they're going to have to sign him next year if they want to keep him around. Like, they clearly took that Super Bowl to heart. They took that absolute battering Mahomes got from that Bucs defense to heart and went, it's not happening again. It's not. We have to draft it here. We have to invest some capital, and fair play to them. They really have. So, yeah, what do you guys think, Mark? Have you got?
Not really. I mean, the only thing I would say is that they've went a different way around to these other teams we've been talking about. You know, these other teams have been talked about have been hitting the draft and gambling on the draft to fill in their line positions. What the Chiefs have done is they've went, well, what we'll do is we'll trade for a known commodity in Orlando Brown. There's your left tackle. We'll spend a fortune on Joe Tooney, and there's your left guard. So what they've done is they've thrown a bit of money, and then they had Lucas Niang from TCU. I think it was a 3rd round draft pick last year. They got Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma, and they got a guy who I really liked in the draft, Trey Smith from Tennessee. And I said he's a good phone booth blocker, as in, like, he's not going to move around too much, but he'll put whoever's in front of him on his horse. He'll block anybody in a phone booth. But yeah, they've thrown money at it. They haven't went necessarily the way the other teams and drafted players. They've went, right, okay, let's get somebody who's known. And I think that's the difference when you're in a win now window. When you're the Jets and you're building a franchise, you can draft and you can wait 2 or 3 years for these players to mature. The Chiefs want to go back and win the Super Bowl this year. You know, they've had Super Bowl win, Super Bowl loss, but they want another Super Bowl win. They want to make it 3 Super Bowls in a row, and they want to win this one. So they're like, we want to know what we're getting. We're going to go get the best guard on the free agency availability, and we're going to trade for somebody who had a really good season last season, in relief for the left tackle Stanley Staley, who was injured, and Orlando Brown. So they went out and got known commodities because they're in a win now window.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Mark. You're right. It's a win now window. You've got probably one of the top 5 QBs in the game. You've been in the playoffs the last couple of years. You've been to the Super Bowl the last couple of years. Why not do it? The slightly confusing one for me was the money they dropped on Joe Tooney, because guard isn't traditionally a position you would spend tons of money on. But when you watch the Super Bowl, a lot of pressure was coming through the interior. So I can see why they've gone down that route. The reason we've only got them in emerging lines, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe one or two of you guys might have a point after I've said this, but I think we have them in emerging lines purely because of the number of new parts in the line. It's a tough scheme to learn, Andy Reid's. It's a lot like a lot of the other West Coast schemes. It's not something I feel like with Joe Tooney, you could drop him in, say, the Titans line, and you wouldn't even notice that he'd come there. You might see an improvement, but you wouldn't necessarily see him try to adapt to the game. Dropping him into the Chiefs line and a couple of, even like Orlando Brown, who's not, again, he's not really a space guy, as you said. He's a sun blocker, I think was the term you used earlier, which is a brilliant way of describing him. These are guys that traditionally haven't been great fits in sort of an Andy Reid scheme. So I think what you're seeing at the moment is kind of an adaptation to that. And that's probably why they're only in emerging and not yet in the top tier. But I think give it 3-4 weeks of the season, I think they'll be ready to go.
I think you hit on a couple of interesting ones there. I do think we kept it in emerging for a couple of reasons. It's that, and we mentioned it before. They've brought in a couple of veterans, and they've got 3 younger players. Realistically, Niang was only drafted in the 2020 draft, and they took 2 offensive linemen this year. So basically, the whole offensive line has just bar Niang is new this year. Niang is the only returning player on that starting offensive line, as far as we know right now. So I think there's probably still some development there. We will see it. Like, we might see some teething problems at first, as well as is something that can happen with these kind of things. Like, we saw it with the Bucs last year. Like, they weren't at the start of the year. I don't think many people thought they were going to be a playoff contender, and it came together. I think we'll see a similar thing with the Chiefs' offensive line. It might be a bit rough at first, but I think those 2 veteran heads will help bring it all together. I think that's part of the reason they've been brought in.
Yeah, for every good line, there's going to be a bad one. So, like, I'm going to steal Matt's bit. And I'm going to say, like, because it's my catchphrase, so I'll be fucked if anybody else is saying it. If there's a good offensive line, who are the bin fire offensive lines? Who's, burning down hard? Who would you say, John?
I think there are 2 obvious candidates from what we've seen so far in the preseason, and unfortunately, the 2 teams that I think with a half decent one will be pretty decent sides. Let's start with Miami, shall we? Because I think there's a lot to like about Miami Dolphins as a team. We've talked about them in fairly glowing terms on here. The question has always been the quarterback, and then you watch the preseason games and you think to yourself, well, they're not giving him much chance to succeed anyway. That offensive line is absolute garbage. It's one of those things they've given up offensive line assets in the past. You think about guys like Tunsil and people like that. These are guys that potentially could have been foundational pieces of the lines, but then when they've traded them away, they've actually been able to get guys like Tua. So it's a bit of a, I don't know. It's almost like they took a dodgy bargain in a way. But they're definitely suffering for it now. They've given Tua some weapons. They've got a pretty good offense aside from that. But if they can't protect him, it's going to be a long, long season. I don't know what you think, Mark, but I've seen them a couple of times and I thought they were dismal.
Do you know what? Like, Tua's a lefty. Tua's a left-handed quarterback. So, your right tackle, in effect, is kind of like your left tackle. He's protecting his blind side. So they've invested. I mean, Miami Dolphins have put pieces at this line. They've tried to put pieces at this line. They've got Austin Jackson, who was a first-round talent last year, who they drafted from USC. And people said it was a year too early. But look, he was there and they took him. I think it was because there was a run-on tackles earlier on and they thought, fuck, we're going to be the last people at the ball. So they might have reached a little bit on Austin Jackson. They then went back and got Liam Eichenberg this year from Notre Dame. A bit like Alex Leatherwood, he's played a lot of football there and he's a senior and he's had good coaching. I'm not quite sure why, but at the moment they're playing him at left guard. The concern I have is what would be on Tua's blind side, which in this case is the right. And they've got Jesse Davies at right tackle. Jesse Davies has been in the league 5 years, never really shone anywhere. He's got that vet head. But, he's not good enough to protect the blind side. What I would be doing, personally, if I was Miami Dolphins, I would be putting Eichenberg out there at right tackle to protect the blind side because he's playing a lot of high-caliber football, championship football, playoff championship football for Notre Dame. And I'd be looking to put somebody out there to protect him more, a little bit more. I like Hunt, who's in at right guard. I think he's a good player. I think he could play a right tackle at a pinch. I do think that this line is young, and I do think it's got promise there. I just don't think they've got players in the right spots on it.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. Is getting the pieces in the right place. Yeah, like you, I think it looks a bit confused at the moment. I think it's I don't think they really know what the line is. I don't think they know what the best 5 are. I think they might know who the best 5 players are, but I don't think they know who the best ones at the positions are. That sometimes shakes itself out during preseason, but at the moment they really look lost and they need to get it together ideally as quickly as possible because of what we've talked about with cohesion and kind of working with the QB. If you're Tua, you probably want to be spending, at least one full game behind that line before the start of the season. There's only one preseason game left now. They've got to get it sorted pretty soon.
it would be a shame as well because Tua's looked absolutely brilliant in the preseason. You know, like one thing I've really been impressed with has been the buzz around Tua, particularly like in the footage I've seen of him. He's pushing the ball more downfield. He's taking more chances on receivers who are NFL open instead of Alabama open. You know, and I've really been impressed with Tua. And I'm impressed in general with the Dolphins roster. You know, like I do think they've got the pieces on this line. I would like to see in this last preseason game, I would like to see Eitenberg tried at right tackle. He's a very good tackle, that kid, you know, John. He was really good at Notre Dame. He was one of them that I thought could have squeezed himself into the first round. And I just think that yeah, they could make things a lot better if they were to put, for example, Eitenberg. If they were to swap Jesse Davis and Liam Eitenberg around, I think they could be all right. You know what I mean?
So that's the Dolphins successfully shamed, shall we say? And then we have another team that we think is a bin fire, to coin Mark's phrase, and I think we'll go with JP on this one.
Jesus, yeah, the Bears, the Chicago Bears. It's a real shame because the signs of them getting themselves together, they seem to finally have a QB after, 30 years of not having one? 40 years of not having one, maybe. There's the signs of them getting it together, but it's a bit like Tua again. Would I want to be playing behind that O-line right now? Definitely not. I think the saving grace might be, one, it sounds like they're going to start Dalton week 1. So if one of the QBs is going to get killed, it's going to be him. And two, like Fields is quick enough to potentially get them out of danger. What we were talking about with Russell Wilson earlier, that applies to Fields as well. I think I'm right in saying Mark has a fair bit to talk. I know he loves Justin Fields. I think he has a fair bit to say on the Bears as well. So what do you have for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll make it quick. This offensive line is so bad that I would not be playing Andy Dalton, who's a statue behind them, put it that way. I think Justin Fields has got the best chance of making this Bears offense work, and that's what we've seen so far, albeit against number 2s and number 3s in defense. But yeah, you know, like Justin Fields, if they want to make it work, they're going to have to put mobility behind that Bears offensive line because it is dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Like bin fire, skip fire, that one. It is awful. You know what I mean? No, I mean we saw Justin Fields nearly get decapitated this week in a play. I think we all saw. I mean, unblocked man. Nobody put up the blocker. We are standing, from a 2-point stance. 3-1 on the quarterback. Almost killed him. Not what you want to see, but look, like at least Fields can stretch the play and make things happen with his legs. That Bears line is as bad as I've seen in a long time. You know what I mean, John?
Speaking of injured players nearly getting killed, that brings me on to one of the additional lines I'd like to bring up quickly while we're at this, which is the Cincinnati Bengals, who have an absolute bin fire offensive line and have done forever. They've invested a little bit, but I still think it's going to be a bin fire. I think they're going to get judged for not taking Sewell. I do think it's going to be a big thing going forward. The other one that I did want to bring up quickly while we're on offensive lines, because it's one of the most inconsistent lines in the league, is the LA Rams. 2 years ago, best line in the league. The year after that, worst line in the league. Year after that, best line. It's like they just go up and down, despite having the exact same pieces on that line every year. So they could either be the best line in the league this year, or they could be the absolute bin fire. So the one to watch, at least. It's something to think about as we go into the year of NFL games post preseason.
Really good point on Cincinnati. That Jamar Chase pick is starting to look like a real mess. We could probably do a covering that in more detail at some stage, but my God, that is starting to look like. I don't know if that's a bin fire. I think that's a recycling plant fire at this point. I don't know. I mean, it could all turn around. We've talked before about legal issues don't necessarily mean a great lot in the NFL as long as you can play. But the thing is, he can't play either at the moment. He seems to be dropping every pass thrown his way. So it's going to be an interesting year there. Mark, I think you've got one more O-line you want to chuck in, haven't you?
just a quick throw in there. It's another AFC North team. The Steelers have got a really poor offensive line. They lost a couple of pieces this year to retirement. The Castro and Pouncey, had been on that line for a long time and made Pro Bowls and stuff like that. Like their offensive line, they went and got Trey Turner, who was injured last year. They've got, oh God, I can't even pronounce their left tackle's name. Chukwuma Okafor. He's their left tackle. They've got Zach Banner, who's probably the only name I really recognise outside of Trey Turner. But yeah, they invested heavily in a running back in Najee Harris. They've got an old aging quarterback as well who does that double clutch pump fake, doesn't he? Like, the famous Big Ben double pump fake. But if you can't
got a touchdown with it this week against us, didn't he? Absolutely rinsed us with it. Oh, I was embarrassed.
Yeah, the double clutch pump fake, he's been doing it for 15 years, but still defenders bite on it. But you can only do that double clutch pump fake if you've got an offensive line in front of you blocking. And Najee Harris is going to need lanes to run behind. If the Steelers' offense is going to be something, that offensive line, which is a big question mark at the moment, is going to have to be reasonably good, at least, especially in the AFC North, where you want to dominate in the run game.
I think Steelers is a good shout. You saw it against the Browns a little bit in the end of last season, where the Browns went for them from the off, and they kind of collapsed a little bit. Is it the first or second snap and they mess up? But if that's it for bin fires, we can sort of not wrap the episode up. We'll get towards the end of it really. Week 2 preseason games happened. Anything of note from anyone particular? I'll come to you first, Bones, because I feel like you spoke less than them too.
There were a few this week. Pat Freiermuth at the Steelers had 2 touchdowns. One of them was the pump fake that I was talking about. Big Ben with his infamous double throw faked out a defender. Freiermuth went up. Yeah, it looked pretty good. Mac Jones again had a pretty good turnout. He's looking solid. I don't know that he starts in a hurry. I still think Cam's got the job, but he's one to watch for the future for definite. Lance, we saw the same teething problems. Like, it's not a bad teething problem though. Like, this is the thing. Like, he can overpower his throws occasionally, but it's easy to teach a guy to throw less powerful than it is to teach a guy to throw more powerful. Like, it's a simple thing to be coached. It's coaching. That's all it is. And I think there were quite a few decent ones. There were a few not decent ones, but that's someone else can go into the not decent ones a bit more. But no, that's who I liked. That's who I saw that I was quite pleased with this week. I don't know why I'm so interested in watching Mac Jones play. I just think he's a very interesting quarterback.
JP?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. I don't think we saw anybody that we hadn't already seen stand out. I don't think there was anybody that we suddenly went, oh shit, where did they come from? I think everybody that's looked solid so far continued to. We obviously talked about. Obviously, I'm going to talk about Trey Lance. I'm probably going to try and mention him on every podcast until he gets the starting job. So, judging from the current news coming out of the Bay Area, that could be all season. So we'll see. I don't know, but he started badly. I don't think you can sugarcoat 0 for 5 with an interception. It was bad. But to come back from that sort of adversity, end up with a pretty decent stat line through 2 good touchdowns. Bonds is absolutely right. He's lacking some touch on the shorter throws. I do kind of think one of the issues that he is having is that our receivers are, frankly, used to. Well, I won't say shit throws, but throws with less velocity on them, because the QBs that we've had have largely been these sort of average-armed quarterbacks, and now we got a genuine strong-arm guy in there. I think certainly guys like Brandon Ayuk, it's a bit like, what on earth is happening here? I shouldn't be getting the ball this, but I think it's coming along. It's coming along. He's not going to start week 1. I'll state that. And feel pretty confident in saying it now. I don't think he's going to start week 1. But he keeps looking like he belongs. And as long as he does that and looks like a viable option, there'll be chatter in San Francisco about him starting. I think Mark wants to come in here, so I'll see what he's got. Go on, Mark.
Well, that was a really good point, because there is some starting quarterback jobs, which I think, camp battles is what they're talking about, which have been decided this week. Bridgewater came out and done really well as Drew Lock struggled. He's already been named the starter in Denver as a result of that. And we saw Jamie's have a wonderful game. You know, and he's probably just sealed the starting gig for the Saints off the back of that. So whilst Trey Lance might not have sealed the starting slot, we've seen a couple of quarterback camp battles, you know, like end, so to speak. And we're going to probably see Bridgewater and we're probably going to see Winston both started their respective teams. A couple of left field players who I felt done really well. Nate Hobbs at the Raiders, again, really impressed.
He took it out off me.
Yeah, that kid's looking really well, which is great because we tried getting Lamarcus Joyner and playing him at nickel, and that never really worked. And Bones, you know who our best nickel was probably last year? Nevin Lawson, who used to play for you guys. That's how bad we were in the nickel position. But Nevin Lawson was probably our most consistent nickel last year. So the fact that Hobbs has come in and has done really well through 2 games is really impressive. Tony James at the Saints, you know, like a relatively unknown player, was signed to a future contract last year by the Saints. He's come in and running back, and Sean Payton's already said that he's our number 2 running back. He's already leapfrogged Latavius Murray, and he's ran really, really well in the 2 games that he's been playing in. He looks really good, caught some balls out the backfield. Ramondre Stevenson again looked well to the point where Sony Michel now has been moved on. And I think that was to make space for Stevenson on the roster, because I don't think they were going to be able to suit him up. I don't think they were going to be able to put him on the 53. And he'd been playing that well. I don't think he would have made it the practice squad either. So they've been able to get something for Sony Michel. They've been able to keep Ramondre Stevenson. I think Harris is going to be the bell cow back in that offense now. So we're seeing a few roster moves. We're seeing a few things click. A few transactions this week. The Raiders have traded for Denzel Perryman. We lost 2 linebackers who were doing really well in camp, and Javon White, the lad who's from Nevada. He's a Vegas native, and he was on our.
Good about him.
Yeah, he's unfortunately injured. And Nick Morrow, who was on Mike, and who was probably our better linebacker last year, probably our best defensive player last year. He's also got a knee injury. They're a bit more hopeful on him coming back. So we went out and we've got Denzel Perryman from the Carolina Panthers. And of course, Perryman knows Gus Bradley's system really well. So there's a transaction of note there. And of course, the other one is the trade that the Rams made for Sony Michel. Don't think they were ever going to be enamored with the durability of Darrell Henderson. So they've went out and they've got some vet insurance, and they've went and got Sony Michel, who's a decent enough running back in the NFL.
Just you mentioned Perryman there. I think it's quite ironic that the Raiders have said that every fan has to be vaccinated, and yet Perryman's going to play for them. He's refusing the vaccine. So only way you get into the stadium without a vaccine is by suiting up, I suppose. Anyway, so I think I just thought it was something funny that I read today. I think is there any players that you look bad? That was not mentioned.
I wouldn't say particularly looking bad, but there's enough concern. You know, I would say that I don't think Trevor Lawrence has looked bad, although I think his lines look terrible. But I would say that I think Urban Meyer's looked bad in the last couple of games. They only put up 3 points, you know, like on the last game. They looked very stale on offense. It's not what I've come to think about an Urban Meyer, having followed him in the college game and how he likes to spread things out and how he uses gadgets. Whether he's keeping part of his playbook back for when the real season starts, but they just look very stale on offense. Travis Etienne's injured now as well, which is fine. They've got James Robinson anyway, you know, who's a very, very good player. But yeah, I wouldn't say that Trevor Lawrence has looked bad. I think he's just driving a very stale offense at this moment in time. But there's still been some really good throws from Lawrence where I'm like, wow, he is what he is.
JP, something on Meyer?
Yeah, I think when we talked about the Jaguars, I wasn't big on Meyer coming into the pros, and it's actually worked the opposite way to what I thought it would so far. I don't know if he's trying to inhibit himself somehow, like he's trying to be a pro coach, if that makes sense. He's not coaching what has worked for him in the past. It's certainly not that, because I don't think you could play the genuine spread option anyway in the NFL, but it's not even anything like that. As you said, Mark, the right word is stale. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where the plan. I don't know what the plan is. Unless they're suddenly going to come out with 5 wide receivers on the first offensive play of the year, they're going to be hiding something, surely. But I don't know. They look really poor for me.
Let's not forget, it is the preseason. People are not using their full playbook right now. As much as I'd love to bash Urban Meyer, I think we have to wait till the regular season starts to see him actually start using whatever he's got up his sleeve. Because I don't think we're going to see a single trick play or single thing that's going to give away his team in the preseason. I think that's part of what it is. We were talking about things like looking concerning. I think there are a few concerns around the league. Watching the Panthers' first drive, that was, Donald threw 1 pass for 11 yards, 1 for an incompletion, and then they just ran it down the rest of the field. Even in the red zone, they didn't trust Donald to make the throw. And I know it's not a concern, but in a way, seeing they've brought in this new quarterback and they're in the red zone and it's preseason and they're not just letting him throw the ball a couple times to see what he can do, that seems concerning to me. I just thought I'd bring that up while we're on concern.
Yeah, Mark, you had a bit here.
Yeah, there's a few things that I want to bring up. Wilson again looked awesome for the Jets. I think they're going to be. I think they're looking and they're really pleased. I think he's probably been the pick of the quarterbacks. I said that last week, and I still think he's probably looking the pick of them so far. Oh God, the Eagles. Jesus, wept. How dreadful were they? They put up 0, but I think there was a lot more to that 0. Jalen Hurts didn't suit up. He was apparently had a stomach injury, but he was at the ground. I'm not too sure about that. He got a stomach injury, but at the ground. He was meant to be sent to hospital, but yet he was on the sideline. I don't get that. I don't know. There's something, if there's a smell about the New York Giants, and there's definitely a smell about the Philadelphia Eagles. There's going to be some dramatic storyline, I think, coming out the NFC East in the next few days, I think. Because I think both franchises just stink to the high heavens at the moment.
I can't see where the Eagles are going as a football team. I think when we talked about them on the divisional breakdowns, it was kind of like, where are they going? What is the plan here? At least with the Giants, I know we keep saying there's a smell about the Giants, and I'm sure it's just to check that Higgins is watching. But there is a smell about the Giants, but I can at least point to something they're actually trying to do. I'm not saying it'll work, but I can see what they're going for. The Eagles, I haven't got a clue. I don't know what the offensive scheme is. I don't know what the defensive scheme is. I don't know why the starting QB's not playing. As you say, if he's got a stomach injury, what the hell is he doing on the set? Nothing makes any sense. It's like they're trying to compete with Houston for the number 1 overall pick. At least Houston, after the initial sort of the hype and all the hyperbole around Deshaun Watson, they've just kind of got on with camp. They don't look good, but at least they're just existed as an NFL franchise. I don't know what the hell is going on in Philadelphia. I really don't. There's going to be riots by November at this rate.
Right.
Speaking of the Houston Texans, have you seen who the Houston Texans starting quarterback officially is?
Is it
Tyrod Taylor?
It's Tyrod Taylor is their starting quarterback going into the 2021-2022 season.
Hey, doing this, Tyrod Taylor, he was a starting quarterback at the Buffalo Bills, and last year he was a starting quarterback at the Chargers before they injected him into his lung, and Justin Herbert came in and looked fantastic.
It's one way to get your rookie QB on the field, isn't it? Just actively try and kill your starting quarterback.
And it probably paid off for the Chargers. They probably had a way better year under Justin Herbert than they were ever going to have under Tyrod Taylor, and I will not be convinced otherwise.
Didn't we Tyrod Taylor? He won me a fantasy league a few years back, so I think I'm always going to defend him. He looked all right, though. When he came from the Ravens to the Bills, he kind of settled in and did all right at the Bills for a period. He was like that dual threat quarterback. Go by with his legs, not got the biggest arm, but can make some throws. And yeah, look, I'm not that heavily dissing Tyrod Taylor.
A lot like Mariota for us. JP,
sort of
Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, really good point about Mariota. Similar sort of player, although Mariota obviously came with a lot more hype, being the number two overall pick. Taylor can play. I mean, that's a slightly backhanded compliment because it basically implies the other QBs can't. I actually thought they would start Davis Mills, though. I really did, because what have they got to lose? Everybody seems to think they're going to lose every game anyway. I'd like to see what Davis Mills can do. He was good at Stanford, but he hasn't really shown out in the preseason, so I kind of get it. And for their guy who's their head coach, David Culley, I think his name is, it's likely to be his only shot at NFL coaching, head coaching job. Why not try and win some games? I think they might win one or two. I can't see him going 0-17, but I can't see him doing much better than that, to be honest. The old Brian Clough line of they were lucky to get nil seems to spring to mind when I think of Houston. But I don't know. Maybe Philadelphia's on their schedule. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's going to be a long year in Houston and a long year in Philadelphia. So strap in, guys. It's going to be a good one.
Houston should probably start Davis Mills, because at least then they'll get a look at him and know what he's like. Because you never know. They're going to be picking early in the draft, and if they're picking early, they're probably going to be taking Rattler. You know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? They're probably going to look at a quarterback. And you might as well have a look at Davis Mills and see what you've got beforehand. You know what I mean? Though? So, yeah, I mean, you never know. Davis Mills might look half decent, and they still might be picking early, and they might go get Thibodeau instead. But at least have a look at the guy and see what's there, John. I don't think I would start in week one, but I'd like to see him in for half of the season so that they can get deets at the guy,
Depending on what happens to Deshaun, I think they're going to have to give Mills a look at some point, aren't they? Because you can't draft a guy. Let's not forget, they drafted him with the first pick of the draft because they didn't have any other picks from trading them away. But you can't draft a guy in the third round and then go, no, we're not going to look at him. No, never mind. I know one of our QBs is in prison and the other one's proven to be a terrible NFL quarterback. But screw it. No, we're not going to play him. So I really can't see how they can't give him a go. But hey, it's Houston. They'll probably trade him for somebody.
Watson's not playing this year. I'm saying it. He's not playing this year. He's out. He's done.
The longer that goes on, the more likely that is. It's nearly week one now. It's nowhere near resolved. He can't play while this is going on, can he? Really?
Is there a team that's got a history of taking on bad boys?
Yeah, unfortunately, somebody read the rule book wrong and thought it said bad players in the last 20 years. So I don't know. I don't know how that one's going to work. It would be interesting. I hope he goes to a team like that probably need a little bit of a push. Assuming that, of course, that he isn't prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I would quite like to see him.
He'll be all right.
He's got money. Well, yeah, let's not get into that. We nearly got thrown
allegedly.
a weeks ago.
You know what? On that point, though, I genuinely think that the Raiders are sitting on Carr's deal because they're hoping that Watson is made available. It's a theory that's popped into my head because why would you let, we talked about it last week, why would you let Josh Allen hit the table? Because that's only going to hike up Carr's price, and now Carr's going to be pushing for over $30 million, and I'm not paying him it. I think that the Raiders are a sneaky candidate for Deshaun Watson coming across. I genuinely do think that the Raiders will be, because we've obviously got that Clemson link. We've got Clay Ferrell there. We've got Hunter Renfrow. Got John Simpson. Got Tanner Muse. You know what I mean? And Deshaun Watson led them guys to a national championship. And I think regardless of what Deshaun Watson's done or whatever, I think flashing, Joe. That's what he's done. Regardless of what he's done, I still think that he's too much of a talent to overlook, and I do think that the Raiders. That's why we haven't seen Carr at the table. Let's talk about it. If they wanted to make it happen, it would have happened by now. Carr's keen. So what would be the hold-up? They could have got it done 2 months ago if that was the fact. They're keeping their powder dry for something because you're going to have Baker hitting the table. You're going to have Lamar hitting the table. And you've obviously already got Allen hitting the table. Now, all them are going to get way more than Carr. But even if they get $40 million, Carr's going to start be talking about wanting 35, 36, 37. I ain't paying him it. I'm not paying him it. I'm not fucking paying him it. I'd rather go get Watson.
So I think we're nearly wrapping up, but I'm just going to throw a little hand grenade in the conversation. I'm not even going to say the name, but I am going to say this. There is a long history of ex-49ers players go into the Raiders, and we might be a quarterback short next year. Just saying.
Good God, no.
It would be quite funny to see some of the, again, I'll use the euphemism I used earlier, more optimistic Raiders fans out there in third and short world completely revise their opinion on Jimmy Garoppolo just because he's wearing a black and silver and black shirt next season. But we'll.
I won't.
I know you won't.
So yeah, on that absolute bombshell, to quote Top Gear from back in the day. Another. Thanks for having me, guys. Anyway, I know it was last minute and Jordan's not so well, but I appreciate you letting me come on and sit in the background, really, which I was quite happy with. And again, thank you to you three for putting it all together and doing your prep work and putting the order and stuff like that. It helped me massively. I know you do it anyway, but it was massive for me. Literally trying to wing it. At least I had some sort of structure there to try and go off. Hope everyone who's listened enjoyed it. Hopefully the guys along with Jordan will be back next week. In terms of the other podcast, the third and short, Jamie and Tom, I have no idea when we'll be back. We've been discussing it for weeks and we can't get the three of us available at the same time on the same day. So maybe we just won't come back. Who knows? But it's been great chatting football with some guys again. George just commented there. I'm glad he's watched. I'll send you my invoice, mate. Tune in next week. I'm sure it'll be released on the Twitter, which is at Third Short Pod. It'll be released on the Facebook. And if you're not in the group chat and you want to be in the group chat, get at us. We'll throw you into the lion's den, so to speak, and then we'll go from there. So we'll from myself, JP, Mark, and Bones, we will see you all again soon.